Okay, guess we are live. Welcome everyone to the I Teach PTE webinar series. We are halfway through, started early 2025, and there are a couple of months ahead of us. And today is the webinar on giving feedback on PTE speaking task. And I'm glad that we already have the chat open, because as you remember, we shared feedback survey with you, and some of you pointed out that you'd like more interaction, more communication between the presenter and you. So that's why we decided to have the chat open, and there will be some of the activities for you to interact and to put them in the chat. Hello, I can see people joining. Hello from Sydney, Yasmin, good to have you here. Anwar, great. So there are two options. Please remember that the chat will be for this communication with the presenter. And if you have any feedback on PTE speaking task related questions, please put them in the Q&A. And by the end of the webinar, we'll do our best to try to answer some of them if time allows. And I guess, Magda, the floor is yours. So I hope that you're going to enjoy the session. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bartek. I'm very happy to be here. Hi, everyone. Great to see such a cross-section of folks. We've got a lot of folks from South Asia, which is wonderful. A warm welcome to you. So let me just reiterate what Bartek said. We're going to use the chat, thanks to your great feedback. But any questions that you have about anything that I covered today, please put it in the Q&A. We really need a record of those questions. We need them separate. And it's also very difficult for me to multitask, right? So sometimes I lose the questions in the chat. So it's just better to have them all in one place, okay? But keep the chat going. We're quite a small group, so I think you'll hear a lot from one another. Okay, so let's just do a quick introduction to me. Some of you may know me. I'm the Global Pearson Test of English Teacher Training Manager, and I'm based out of London. I have visited some of the countries that you're in a kind of PTE capacity, but I've also delivered a few of these webinars, so you may have seen me presenting those. I basically went into English language teaching straight from university and have been teaching and then training educators ever since. And now I work with the lovely PTE teacher training team at Pearson, some of whom I think you know. That's the likes of Alex, Shanali, Bartek, of course, Steve, Su Ming. And we basically work on teacher training courses, we work on teacher webinars, and we also work on teacher resources as well. So thank you very much. I hope you benefit from the session today. Okay, so what is the session today? We're going to look at achieving three objectives. So first of all, we're going to look at what feedback means, right? It's in the title of the webinar. We need to make sure that we all understand what we're talking about. We're actually really going to deep dive into the score guide, particularly around one question type, which is summarized group discussion today. I'll talk more about that in around 15 minutes. And then we're going to look at a couple of classroom activities to support effective feedback that hopefully you can go away and try. And please do ask me questions if I'm not explaining it as clearly as you'd like me to. Okay, so why don't we kick off then with the first objective, which is impactful feedback. And I will start by introducing what Pearson defines feedback as, okay? And we have a very, very, very good Pearson report on feedback for learning. And in it, it says, and I'm just going to read it for you word for word, at its core, feedback is information for learning. It contains information about a learner's performance or understanding and is used to adjust thinking or behavior to improve learning. It can be provided by instructors, learning systems, or peers. Okay, so I think the two key things there for me are one, that in a PTE classroom, the same applies. We are giving feedback because we want to adjust the students' thinking, or we want to adjust the students' behavior so that they get a higher score or the required score that they need for study, travel, migration purposes. Okay. And the second thing is that, yes, we can give feedback as instructors, but there are obviously other students in the class that can give feedback as well. So important to know that, it's not all on our shoulders as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about training individual test takers and all the students in the class to be able to give feedback. Okay, so I think let's just start with an icebreaker, I think. So in the chat, please think back to a time when you received feedback, and just remember that definition that I gave you, from a learner, from a teacher, or even outside the classroom. I remember some really helpful feedback from a driving instructor, a lot of really helpful feedback that still has stayed with me today. What made that feedback helpful or not so helpful? So you can give examples of unhelpful feedback that you've received as well. 30 seconds, quiet time. Can you think and then put some suggestions in the chat for me? Okay, so you're quite quiet. That's okay.
Oh, so like mid wrote that so it helps to know what the weaknesses of students are. And unhelpful, there's one from Yasmin. It's incomplete. They were unable to highlight their mistakes.
Okay, very good. Lovely. Thank you so much. Yes, okay, they're coming through. I can see them now. Yeah, that's great. Okay, okay, so Mead, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I think it doesn't help. I mean, I'm not sure. Do you mean it doesn't help to know what the weaknesses of the students are? I think feedback should highlight areas of development. I think we can maybe change that word. Weaknesses, it sounds quite negative, so it could be a little bit discouraging, but maybe perhaps areas for development could be really good. And I think that it's very important to be specific on those to really help students to succeed. Okay, so Yasmin, okay, so yes, the students were not able to highlight their mistakes. It's important to reflect on why that might be. Perhaps they don't themselves understand what it takes to do that task really, really, really well. So we'll touch on that in the webinar today. I think feedback that boosts confidence, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I was planning to call that out because whenever you can boost confidence by giving feedback, that's best you can give to anyone.
Yeah, Absolutely, Bartek. I completely agree. And it might not be about what is being said, but how it's being said, right? It could be like the tone of the voice, I think is really important to add that positivity.
Yes, yeah.
Excellent. Well done, folks. So keep that in mind as we go through the webinar. So look, it, why it's important to define feedback, why it's important to remember back to helpful, unhelpful feedback that we've received is that we give a lot of feedback in the PTE preparation classroom. And I just want to call out a couple of examples of the feedback that I give. And then you can perhaps tell me if you give feedback at the same point in a course. Okay, so the first one is following a placement test or a diagnostic test. In some of your courses, I know you placement test the student depending on their language level, but some of you give a PTE diagnostic test. I think some of you use our scored practice tests with that. And obviously, that is a great opportunity to give feedback on strengths and areas for development. I go on about this all the time, but it's really important in addition to giving your students plenty of practice of the different question types. It's also important to do strategy building work for those question types, but also develop their language. And what I mean by language is grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation. And these three things, whether you practice in a controlled, restricted way or in a freer way, you need to give feedback on that. Okay, so there's feedback on language tasks in a PT preparation classroom. Number three, after submission of open-ended PTE learner tasks. So for example, if they write an email in PTE core or they write an essay in PTE academic, you are going to, of course, give feedback on those things. Now, some of you do actually individual check-ins or tutorials midway through a course. Some of you do it twice in a course. It really depends, but I really love that. And that's a great opportunity to provide both written and or oral feedback. And then finally, a lot of you do mock tests. Now, some of you just assess a particular skill, so just reading, just writing, all the way through. But some of you give the entire four-skill PTE test as a practice test, perhaps, in the middle or at the very end to see that progress from the beginning. I think that's really lovely. And of course, feedback can be given after that. So very good, folks. Think about it. Are you giving feedback in all of those stages? And today we're really going to focus on the middle one, right? We're going to focus on giving feedback after submission of open-ended PTE learner tasks. And one of those speaking tasks is going to be summarized group discussion, as I mentioned, because probably this is where the majority of feedback comes into play in a PTE classroom. Okay, good. So that is the first objective. I'm going to move on now to kind of the meaty part of the webinar, and that is going to be on scoring. Now, some of you are going to be new to PTE, and some of you will have been teaching it for quite some time. For those experienced teachers, just bear with me. Some of this stuff is going to be repeated and you know it, but I still think it's useful. Why? Particularly because we've had some updates to PT Academic. They went live on the 7th of August. So it's really good to kind of refresh your understanding of what those updates mean. Okay. Now, everything I say in this webinar comes from two places: the website, which has just a wealth of really useful information on PTE, and then the score guide. And you'll see here the PT Academic score guide. and the PTE course score guide on our website. If you download them, they have slightly different kind of visual appearance. And it's important to just keep checking in, and just, don't download it and then use the same one for 5 years. It's important just to keep refreshing, and we've obviously changed the design, right, of the face of the academic one. So important that you have the updated score guide always. Okay, so first thing that the score guide tells you is about scoring. And today we're focusing on speaking, right? So I'll just give you an example of option 1, which is correct or incorrect answers. This is very black or white. And that is an example of answer short question in the speaking section. Option 2 is partial credit. And there are a few question types in the speaking section, in fact, all of the rest that fall under this category. I'll just read them out to you, but I'm sure you're familiar with them. Read aloud, repeat sentence, describe image, retell lecture, summarize group discussion, and respond to a situation. And you'll see the same list on this slide. They are part of part 1 of the speaking and writing section. I haven't included the writing question types because this isn't a writing webinar. You'll see that all of them contribute to the overall score, but only some of them contribute to more than one skill. So you'll see that they're in the speaking section, so they all contribute to speaking, but some of them also contribute to listening as well. Why is that? Because obviously to repeat a sentence, test takers need to listen to it first. To retell a lecture, they need to listen to the lecture first. To summarize a group discussion, well, they have to listen to the group discussion first. So that all, I think, makes sense. Give me a yes in the chat if you agree. Okay, the slight difference. Okay, thanks, Yasmin. That's lovely. Good. For PTE core, and I think you may have missed it if you've been writing, but for PTE core, you'll see that 2 question types in pink. Would you say that's pink? Also feed into reading for read aloud and answer short question for listening. So I guess what I wanted to highlight by showing you this is that although the score guides are essentially the Pearson tests of English, there are differences, and it's up to us as teachers to understand what those differences are. Okay, but to give feedback, we need to really understand what the traits are. So really, if you're not familiar with this word, traits, you may be more familiar with scoring criteria, which is kind of the overarching term. But we call traits content, pronunciation, oral fluency, and appropriacy. And these 4 are the only traits you have to remember for speaking. Now, the difference is, if you have a look at the slide really carefully, is that for respond to a situation, for PT academic, we have content. And if I jump, and you can see the pink again, for PT core, the trait is called appropriacy. Okay, so there's just a slight difference in the naming of the 2. Again, does it matter for test takers? Not really, but is it important for teachers? Yes, I think it is important to be using the right terminology. Okay, so look, the scoring for each trait, and I'm going to call that the rating scale, is quite straightforward. So if we go from right to left, oral fluency 0 to 5, PT academic and PT core, good. Pronunciation 0 to 5, PT Academic and PTE Core, good. But for content, PT Academic and Appropriacy, PTE Core, it does vary a little bit. So really focus on this because this is really important. For PT Academic and PT Core, repeat sentences 0 to 3. Okay, for content. In PT Academic, it's 0 to 6 for describe image, retell lecture, summarize group discussion, respond to a situation, again, for content. For PTE Core, describe image is actually 0 to 5. And for respond to a situation, it's 0 to 3. So I guess what I'm saying is this is important for test takers because they are going to be receiving that, perhaps that estimate from you on their work. And therefore, it's important for you to understand what the rating scale is as well for each of the question types. Okay, not just speaking. So let's interact now, and I'd like you to answer a question for me. And Bartek, I would love you to paste the links to both school guides, please, in the chat.
1 second.
And teachers, I would like you, please, to find the page number for the appendix.
That's
And
the first one.
thank you.
And
So
the
that should
second
be
one.
academic, yeah.
Yes.
Good. And then teachers for PTE Core as well. Bartek will paste the score guide there. It's a slightly shorter link.
In the chat, yes.
Fabulous. Have a go, open those documents. Tell me what page number is the start of the appendix, please, for both. Bartek, did you send it to everyone? Gifty can't see the link.
Hold on a second. One more time. One second. Okay, so the first link and the second one.
Hopefully that's better, folks.
Yeah, got the link. Okay, Grima, thanks a lot. So you have the links right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me just repeat the instruction. Open them up, find the page number for each score guide, the appendix, or the start of the scoring criteria. Song, the start of the scoring criteria, the start.
So we've got page 31. Magda.
Oh, no, it's not quite right, Bartek. That is not the link. So for PT Academic, let me share it. Da, da, da. Okay, folks, have a go again because for some reason, okay, try that one, folks. Song, can you try again? Okay, Yasmin, well done. PT Core, you're right. It's page 25. So that's wonderful. Okay, so very good. But everyone, can you use the link I have sent for PT Academic? What page number, please? Not okay. Gifty, you're right. It's page 15. Well done. Okay. Thank you, Gifty. Okay, so this is really important, folks. Okay. The score guide for PT Academic has changed. Okay, so the first link that Bartek sent is the old PT Academic score guide. So I want you to delete that from your desktop. Perhaps you've saved it somewhere in your documents because there is a new link, right? And the link is the second link that I shared. So you really need to replace the old score guide with the new one. Okay, so Yasmin, well done. It's 15. Song, excellent. Page 15. All I ask, Song, is that you replace the old one with this new one. Okay, and it should be very straightforward because as you can see, the branding has changed. So it'll be easy to kind of understand which one to replace with which one. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Wonderful. Keep that score guide open. Keep the core open as well, because we're going to refer to it in just a minute. Okay, so folks, summarize group discussion. Okay, we're going to look at this one more in detail. There is no time in an hour to look at all the question types, so I've chosen summarized group discussion. Why have I chosen summarized group discussion? Because it's a new question type. So even if you have been teaching PTE core, PTE academic for a long time, you will have only just started preparing students for summarized group discussion because this new question type was added on the 7th of August officially into the test. Okay, so let me just recap what this question type involves. Okay, first of all, listen carefully. Test takers need to listen to the discussion, to the group discussion, and that group discussion is up to 3 minutes in length. Okay, so that's quite a long time. Test takers have 10 seconds to prepare and 2 minutes to speak. Okay, you may want to make some notes on this. Okay, so remember 10 seconds to prepare and 2 minutes to speak. Now, this question type appears 2 to 3 times in the test. 2 to 3. So some of your test takers will experience it twice and some 3 times, but it's difficult to know how many exactly. It varies from test to test. And as I mentioned, it's a partial credit question, and it feeds into both listening, the score feeds into both listening and speaking as well. Now, what's really important is it should be a summary instead of simply retelling the group discussion, right? So a summary is all about taking the different information, okay, and putting it together, comparing it, contrasting it, and perhaps the speakers are in agreement, perhaps there are some differences. So it's about kind of reformulating it into that summary, and I'll show you an example of what that looks like in a moment. The key here is that the test taker has to listen really actively, right? Because if they don't listen actively and they miss the information, they're not going to be able to include it in their summary. And then the second thing is that obviously the group discussion is, we talked about it, 3 minutes long. So it's not, it's paramount. It's so important. It's critical that the test taker makes some notes. Every item in every group discussion, in every question, there are 3 speakers, okay? And there is a mix of genders and accents to help you distinguish between each of the 3 speakers. Now, some of you may have difficulty, but really, it's important as teachers to really help the students kind of distinguish between these. And actually, you may want to start your lesson playing the audio and just getting them to write down speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 1, speaker 3, speaker 2, speaker 1, speaker 3, just so that they get familiar with listening to different people within an audio, because often we play audios in our English language teaching classroom which involve a kind of a monologue, one person talking. So this could be a new skill for them that they need to master. If they misidentify a speaker, it's a problem, right? Because imagine if I'm listening to 3 of my neighbors and I say that neighbor 1 said something, but it was actually neighbor 2 who said it, and that gets me into trouble in real life. That's not good. Equally, that's not good in the test as well. Okay, so it's really important that when they're note taking, they kind of align what was being said and by who, so it's nice and accurate. Okay. Now, I mentioned there is up to 2 seconds to give that summary. And I think 2 seconds is, sorry, I think 2 minutes, 120 seconds is quite a long time, but I do think it's, we should encourage students to speak for that length where possible, because you know, a 3-minute group discussion can easily be summarized in 2 minutes. You know, we don't want to miss out any crucial information. So I really feel that a native speaker or someone who's very, very good at English will be able to do it within 2 minutes, and they need that time, I think, just to get a high score. Okay, so thanks everyone. I hope that's kind of summarized this question type for you. We're going to just dive into a little bit more detail. So this session is all about feedback, and in the score guide, you'll see for summarized group discussion under content, it's quite a big chunk of text. And you'll see that for a 6, there are 4 sentences. One is, if you look on the left here, I'm going to just use my pointer, is task achievement. Okay, that the first line represents task achievement. The second talks about the relationships between the different points of view of the speakers. And the third line is really around vocabulary. So again, we'll come back to this. And then the fourth is to do with coherence. Okay. So again, here we've got coherence. Okay. So let's go back. I'm just going to go back to task achievement. And you'll see here that I've basically picked and copied that top line on task achievement for a 6, for a 5, for a 4, 3, 2, 1. So for a 6, it's really clear that you need to be able to comprehend the discussion fully. And the key thing here is paraphrasing the main ideas and expanding on the details of each speaker with specific, this is a difficult word, specificity, which means with the kind of exact details. And you'll see for a 5 that it's quite different, because here we've got some important details, okay? So here we've got expanding on essentially all the details, and here we've got only some important details, okay? But the main idea has been captured, okay? And you'll see for a 4 here, there are some inaccurate ideas. So maybe the test taker has misheard and has inaccurately identified some details. Okay. In terms of the relationships, you'll see here that we talk relationships is all about synthesizing or summarizing the relationships between what the speakers have said. So speaker 1 and 2, do they agree? Do they speaker 3 disagree, and why? And here there's really a great understanding on the different perspectives of the speakers. But here there are only some relationships, maybe some key relationships have been missed. Okay. And number 4, these are very individual summary of what someone has said, rather than that kind of overarching relationship. I mean, perhaps that's missed. So this is something we need to work on with our students. For vocabulary, very similar. We've got a variety of expressions with really good precision and ease. So these kind of accurate sentences kind of come out very naturally and easily. But then, for a 5, they're used appropriately, but perhaps the variety isn't as wide, and perhaps the words aren't as precise either. And here for a 4, there's a lot of like basic description of what was said. For coherence, again, you'll see here that the ideas are very well connected and organized for a 6. It really flows well and is easy to follow. But here, I think the key word is generally. Yeah, if the response flows generally, but there's obviously room for improvement. And here in a 4, the ideas and the response are not very well connected. So it's all a bit disjointed. And that obviously comes from perhaps not taking good enough notes and kind of going back on yourself, etc. Lorena, that's really good. What page am I reading from? So if you go down, you'll see it's quite a long document. It's PT Academic Test Taker Score Guide. And actually, I'll be able to tell you exactly. Dun, dun, dun. Page 25. Okay. Page 25, 26, 27, 28. Hope that helps. 25, 26, 27, and 28. Okay. So that is for content. Obviously, for summarized group discussion, we need to think about pronunciation as well, as that's one of the 3 traits that are scored. And here again, we've got all the vowels and consonants are produced in a manner that is really understood. So no issues with consonants and things. And the stress is great. Word stress, sentence stress is all fully appropriate. And for oral fluency, there are no hesitations or repetitions or false starts. It's just all really clear, and there's an acceptable rhythm, basically. You'll see that for a 4, there are a couple of hesitations. Okay, and again, this comes, from practice of fluency, not just accuracy as well. Okay, so let's get into the detail then. So first of all, I'm going to ask you to listen. So what page could you help me? 25. Let's just do this now. 25, just going to pop it in the chat. 25, 26, 27, and 28. And that's the PTE Academic Score Guide. Okay, that's the second link. Okay, folks. Okay, so let's have a go then and have a listen to one of these questions. And what I'd like you to do is to answer the question at the top. So did all 3 speakers cram for the economic exam? Do all 3 speakers think cramming is good practice? So we talked about identifying the main idea, and this is basically, can you catch the main idea or main ideas? And this is again thinking about the relationships. Okay. Now, cram is an interesting word. So to cram is to study intensively a short time before a test or an exam. Okay. So if you think about it, concept checking questions. Do you study over a long period or a short period? The answer is short period, usually the night before. Okay, so let me play it to you and try to answer the questions. You can put, if you feel comfortable, share your answers in the chat. If you don't feel comfortable, don't worry, I'll share the answers with you in a moment.
3 students are discussing how they study.
Hey! How do you think you did on the economics exam this morning?
It was really tough, and I didn't feel ready for it. It seemed like he tested us on everything in the textbook. What about you?
I stayed up all night studying. I was so tired by the time I got to the exam. I thought I'd fall asleep right in the middle of it.
I know what you mean. I was up all night studying too. I went to bed about 4 a.m. and had to get up at 6 to get to the exam on time.
Are you guys talking about the economics exam? I didn't think it was so bad. I was in bed by 9 p.m. last night. I think it's better to get a good night's sleep before an exam. Staying up all night just makes me more nervous, and when I'm so tired, I can't remember anything. I like to relax, watch a bit of TV, and get to bed early. I think staying up all night studying is a mistake.
Actually, I disagree. I think it's better to stay up all night and cram as much information into my head as possible the night before the exam. When I cram just before an exam, I can remember the information in the short term. That way I can do well on the exam. But, unfortunately, I forget it all the moment I leave the exam room.
I actually think it's important to learn the material, not just try to remember it for the exam. So I don't usually stay up all night to cram for an exam. Usually I spend some time each day going over my notes, and I try to keep up with the material so I don't feel so nervous and upset when the exams come around. I usually do pretty well on my exams, and I sort of enjoy them. But I was so busy with an essay I had to write, I forgot about this one, and I ended up having to study all night. I bet I don't get a great mark on this exam.
Well, I read a study that said university students who get a good night's sleep before their exams, in general, do better than students who stay up all night cramming. So I think it's more important to sleep than to cram.
I read that study too, but they also said that it wasn't enough for students to simply get a good night's sleep the night before the test. The study found that students who got enough sleep every night got better grades. Anyway, I have a system for cramming. I make a list of the most important topics and I review that information. Plus, I often review exams from past terms. That's really helpful. Most professors make up new exam questions each term, so the university has past papers online, and sometimes even the answers. That way, I get an idea of the layout of the exam, as well as what the professor thinks is important.
Okay, great, folks. Okay, so look, I'm going to I've kind of given you a clue as to what the main idea or main ideas are about. One main idea is that some, not all, of the speakers crammed for this economics exam, i.e., studied intensively the night before. And then the second main idea is that all three, not all three speakers think that cramming is good practice. Okay. But what I need help with is who agrees with what, right? And I'm just going to pop in the chat my answer. Actually, that's not working. So let me just tell you as it is. So speaker 1, yes. Okay, they crammed, they stayed up all night. Speaker 2, yes, stayed up all night and crammed, but doesn't usually do that. And speaker 3 didn't cram, they went to bed early. So can you see, to score a good, well in the relationship, it's important to make that distinction. So well done if you did. And then the second question, speaker 1 believes cramming works. Okay, that's why they did it. Speaker 2 crammed, but actually prefers steady studying. Okay, and obviously speaker 3 didn't cram and so believe sleep is better than cramming. Okay, so again, well done if you got that right, but that's what's really important, is to just to make that comparison. Okay, so I'm going to give you now the transcript, because as teachers, it's really important that we work with the transcript of the audio and understand it fully. So I want you to listen to the response from the test taker, and I want you to grade it. I want you to give me a score for content, okay, out of 6, for pronunciation out of 5, and for oral fluency out of 5. And again, if you feel confident, pop your scores in the chat and let's compare and see what folks think.
3 students discussed their study habits for a recent economics exam. Both the male students stayed up all night cramming, which left them exhausted and unprepared. The female student, however, went to bed early and felt the exam was manageable, believing that a good night's sleep is more effective than cramming. The first male student argues that cramming helps him retain information short term, while the second male student usually prefers consistent daily study to truly learn the material and avoid stress, though he had to cram this time. The female student cites a study showing that students who sleep well before exams generally perform better. The first male student adds that consistent sleep is key to better grades overall and shares his cramming strategy of reviewing important topics and past exam papers. In summary, the female student prioritizes sleep, the first male student relies on cramming, and the second male student prefers consistent study but had to cram this time. They all recognize that preparation methods impact exam performance.
Okay, so feel free, folks, to pop your what you think, yeah, for content, pronunciation, and oral fluency. And remember, it's out of 6 for content, out of 5. Okay, Song, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. But yeah, what would you give it? But yes, I mean, you know, I know many teachers who don't give a rating scale, right? They just say excellent. This is an excellent response, yeah, or a very good answer, as you put it. I completely agree. Okay, so let me show you then, because I'm not getting any contributions. So look, this is my assessment. This is not a Pearson assessment. This is my assessment. I agree with Song. It's very well summarized, Parupka. Now I'm going to give it a 5 out of 6 for content, a 5 out of 5 for pronunciation, and a 5 out of 5 for oral fluency. I just want to say that for pronunciation, I did not hear, so this was not a native speaker, but I did not hear any issues with individual phonemes, nor with stress, connected speech, or yeah, such as assimilation, etc. So and for fluency, the same. You know, I really felt there was literally one like I mean, there was one, and I think I have to give the benefit of the doubt. I thought it was really fluent. I thought it was a really nice speed. It's very clear, easy to follow. So again, I'm really proud of this test taker for that. But for content, I didn't give a 6, and I really want you to tell me why. Okay. So we're going to listen again, and I'd like you to give me an explanation as to why she scored 5, in my opinion, for content and not 6. Okay. So off you go. Listen again. Okay. Follow the the discussion and her response, and tell me, why did she not get a 6? And again, I would love you to share your answers in the chat box with me.
3 students discussed their study habits for a recent economics exam. Both the male students stayed up all night cramming, which left them exhausted and unprepared. The female student, however, went to bed early and felt the exam was manageable, believing that a good night's sleep is more effective than cramming. The first male student argues that cramming helps him retain information short term, while the second male student usually prefers consistent daily study to truly learn the material and avoid stress, though he had to cram this time. The female student cites a study showing that students who sleep well before exams generally perform better. The first male student adds that consistent sleep is key to better grades overall and shares his cramming strategy of reviewing important topics and past exam papers. In summary, the female student prioritizes sleep, the first male student relies on cramming, and the second male student prefers consistent study but had to cram this time. They all recognize that preparation methods impact exam performance.
Okay, so look, have a go. I mean, I'm going to give you my opinion, okay? So I think both main ideas which we discussed around who crammed and whether this is a good approach to studying for exams was covered, okay? What I think is missing is some important details, okay? And can anyone, in a classroom, I would ask, okay, Yasmin. So we're getting a bit more specific now. Okay, so let me show you here. Okay. First of all, speaker 3, I think, she wants to have a good night's sleep before an exam. But there was no mention of why she wants that. And actually, she said a lot on the topic, which was missed. So, for example, it makes her nervous. And when she's tired, she can't remember anything. Um, she likes to relax, watch a bit of TV, and go to bed early. So I do think there are some key bits of information that were missing around speaker 3. And then the second thing I want to call out is that she highlighted in that speaker 2 was you know crammed, right, but doesn't usually cram. But what was missed is why they crammed this time. Yeah, because if they don't usually cram, what was different about this economics test exam? And actually it's because, and if you can see here, I've tried to highlight it for you, but it's all to do with the fact that speaker 2 was very busy with an essay. Okay. And again, that was really missed. And I do think that's a critical piece of information. So if we look here, this is a nice kind of overview summary. We've got oral fluency 5 out of 5, pronunciation 5 out of 5, but I have given 5 out of 6, and it's just because of those examples which I've listed. But otherwise, song, I would probably say this is an excellent, actually a sample response, even better than very good. Okay. So all in all, I just want to kind of summarize that activity. I mean, you tell me what you learned from it. Feel free to pop that in the chat. But I think as teachers, we really need to listen carefully to the audio and also read the transcript. Yeah, because it's really important if we're going to give effective feedback, i.e. what was said well and what was missed. We need to really understand the audio, and the transcript is going to be really helpful in that understanding. And the second thing is, like me, using different colors and highlighting those things for learners, because I mean, I need to do that to help me understand it properly. So if I need it, then test takers definitely need it. And that's when they can do peer-to-peer feedback and highlight, and perhaps try and recognize what was missed and what should have been said. So working with the transcript in the classroom, I think, to prepare test takers is really important. I think be realistic with the scores. I think all of you were, pretty much spot on with your analysis, so well done. But avoid inflating the scores, making them better than they really are, or vice versa, because obviously that's not helpful. And then number 4, have learners compare their own scoring with yours. I think it's really important that they get into the detail as much as you do, and that's where the score guide is really important. Yeah. So let's finish off with these classroom activities. Often we just keep the score guide for ourselves as teachers, but I do share it with my students. And I don't just share it at the end once they've submitted the piece of work. I share it at the beginning so that they can write or say the response, understanding what the criteria is. Okay, so think about how to embed this document into your teaching. And then the second idea, which is really critical, is this idea of a checklist. So giving learners a document after they've finished speaking or after they've finished writing, which outlines the rating. So for content, I gave 5 out of 6, for pronunciation, 5 out of 5, for oral fluency, 5 out of 5. I list all the strengths, okay? And then I really highlight the areas for development. And as you know from today, there were no areas for development in terms of pronunciation and oral fluency, but there were some for content, okay? Now, this document is actually a physical document. I have it on my computer. It's a template, and I just type it in, okay? And then I hand it back. Okay. So again, this is obviously quite time consuming if you've got 25 students in the class, but it is really, really helpful to give that targeted feedback. Okay, so that's it from me. I'm just going to leave this slide up while we go to the Q&A. So you've got some time. The first QR code is to the website and the score guide. The second is for Smart Prep and our preparation resources, which have lots of information about these 2 new question types. And then the third is our PTE for Teachers web pages, which again have links to updated documentation related to this question type and the other new question type as well, respond to a situation for PT academic speaking. So I'll leave those up. Bartek, can I go to the Q&A now, if that's okay, because we only have a couple of minutes to go. How many questions do we have?
Yeah, so maybe if you have any other questions, just put them in the chat, but some of them were answered and there's only one extra. Yep.
That's fine. That's great. Thank you, Bartek. So look, Song, a good question. So I'm just wondering if Pearson has a group of PT prep instructors. We don't yet, actually, we're thinking about it, but we haven't got one, I'm afraid. It depends really what region you're in, because there's kind of regional communities in a sense, but a global one, I'm afraid not. But thank you. It's a really interesting idea. The best way to stay connected is, if in China, there's a WeChat community for China teachers, but that's obviously in Mandarin. So some regions have their own initiatives going on, so it's best to kind of get in touch with your local sales representative or the training lead if there is one for that region. Okay, so Bartek, I think the QR codes have been up long enough, so I'm just going to move on. I think, Song, one thing I also wanted to highlight to everyone was a new PT core product that we have available now on our website. So that's the third QR code that I shared. We had one for PT Academic and now we have one for PT Core. Essentially, it's a course made up of 6 modules. It's for free. You just go and do them in your own time, okay? Go on the PT for Teachers Pearson website under teacher courses, you'll see it, and you just have to kind of enroll in each of the 6 modules. Okay, so that is it from me. Bartek, I'm going to hand over to you, please.
Okay, thanks, Magda. So basically, by tomorrow, you will get an email with the survey. So we would appreciate your feedback on webinar, and you'll be able to download your certificate. And please remember that it's worth signing up for the next webinar, because actually next week we are having a webinar. This is the third one, I believe. Ask me anything. So this is like one big Q&A. And if you look at the registration link, you will find the survey link there. So if you copy and paste this link, you'll be able to share your questions, PTE related questions with us. And when we meet next week, we'll do our best to answer them. So the next week's session is basically one big Q&A. So asking and answering questions. So there will be time, we'll be answering questions from the survey, and there will be time for live questions. In the webinar, there will be a panel of experts answering them. So if you have any questions, or if the questions appear somewhere in the near future, please do share the questions and register and join the next week webinar.
Great. Okay, I'm just going to, I think there's, I'm just going to finish off. I know we are running out, we've run out of time, but I just want to answer three things. Chitra, the first classroom activity was essentially just using the score guide in the classroom. Okay, so it's maybe less of an activity, but it's just really reinforcing how important it is for test takers to read and digest that document really carefully to set them up for success. And Mead, I just want to reply to you that there is no relationship here. They cannot score for the relationship if they say speaker 1 said, speaker 2 said, speaker 3 said, right? That is not focusing on the relationships of that initial task, if you remember, some of them crammed, some of them didn't, some of them like cramming, some of them don't value cramming, and I really need to know the relationship between those to be able to score the maximum amount in that. Okay, that's it from me. Bartek, back to you. Have a lovely afternoon, evening, wherever you may be.
Okay, thanks a lot for being with us, and see you hopefully next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.